Sind wir früh? Sind wir falsch? No. Oh. Yeah, I was wondering, are we late or early? Or but you came. So.
I don't think so. No.
By the way, are you joining to the very based in the Netherlands, by the way?
Amsterdam.
Are you joining the user group in a month?
I didn't know there was one.
Now you know.
There's-
I will send you the meetup link once it's public. Eric asked me if I will be there.
Hi, Derek.
Yeah, let me know.
Hello.
Yeah, I went to one GraphQL meetup where Uri was speaking a while ago. Is that the same group or is
Yes.
this a different one?
The same group.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a bit. Eric asked me like a month or 2 months ago, actually just after New Year's. He asked me if I want to speak at this user group, and I was like, yeah, sure. And it's still not up on meetup.com, so
Oh,
I will send the
just-
link once it's up.
yeah.
I think
let me
it's
know.
at Oracle, and I think even someone from your team is coming too.
Oh,
I mean,
that's
from
very well
Apollo.
possible. Yeah.
Is there Nicholas working on the router?
Definitely. Yeah.
Yes,
And
so
he's
I
also
think
based.
he's speaking.
Yep.
I think he's speaking as well.
Oh,
So-
nice. Yeah. Another reason to come. Definitely.
Yeah, it's always good. Gonna go and have some pizza and a few beers.
Yeah.
Always
That's
fun.
cool. Nicholas is already speaking, huh? He just joined the team. That's awesome. Glad to hear it.
I mean, but I heard
There's
I've not
multiple.
seen.
There's multiple nicks, so make sure
maybe
which one
Nico-
so
Nicola.
I think the nick that is speaking is I think he was before the
Yeah.
Oh, Nicola. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Nick M. I think then Nick M is doing that, right?
I met up with him, I think 2 years ago. So he's been here for a while.
Okay. Not Nicholas Sealy, Nicola Munchen, right? I'm
Yeah.
not sure. That's okay. Yeah, there you go. That makes more sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
because we met up when Bryn was also still living here in Amsterdam.
Fun stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, complete. Benji?
Yeah.
Hey folks, how are we doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah, it looked funny. Just getting white and then.
Yeah, it's like your ears are growing.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, isn't it? That's the Zoom background cancellation for you. It's probably because I'm on a black chair as well, so it's all sort of merging together.
Oh, yeah.
Hello everyone, how are we all doing today?
Good.
Yep.
Excellent. All right, let's get this meeting started. I think that we are all. Ooh. We're missing Raphael?
I think we might have lost a couple of people between this and last time because there was no agenda. So maybe people were confused.
Okay.
Yeah, but
yeah.
Rafi signed up too, so I'll shoot him a message.
Nonetheless, I'll get us started. Hello, everyone. Welcome. By being here, we have all agreed to the specification membership agreement, the participation guidelines, the contribution guide, and the code of conduct. Links to all of these are available in the agenda if you need a refresher. First, let's do a quick introduction of the attendees. We'll do them in the order that they appear in the agenda. If you're not in the agenda yet, please make sure that you add yourself. Start with me. Hello, everyone. I'm Benji.
Hi everyone, I'm Michael.
I'm Martin.
Hi, I'm Camille from the guild.
Jeff.
I think that's me. Sorry. Hey, I'm Jeff.
And I'm Derek from Apollo.
And that's only me left. I'm Pascal from Chile.
By process of elimination, that must be you. Yep.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Who would like to help take notes today, please? We have a live notes document, which I am posting into the chat now, but it is also linked in the agenda.
I can help.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff. Wonderful. Okay, so let's take a look at our agenda for today. We are reviewing our previous meetings, our secondary meetings as they were, and looking at the action items. Then on to Michael to discuss the progress so far. And finally, talking about collaboration on a blog post, which is appropriate given I was in a meeting just an hour ago saying how that blog post would be ideal to go out on the GraphQL blog soon. Is there anything that anyone else would like to add or to the agenda? Nothing else to discuss. If you think of something, please post it into the chat. Otherwise, I guess we'll get started. Who would like to summarize the previous 4 secondary meetings, please?
We missed
yeah,
a few.
Yeah. So isn't it 4? I think we skipped 2. But I mean, that's the nature of, we have like high iterations, right? Then if there is either nothing to discuss or somebody's missing, that's important, we skip them.
Perfectly reasonable.
So that's also the item I put in there to discuss the progress where we are. At the moment, we are looking into batching as a topic. And that is important to fetch data between subgraphs, or not between subgraphs, between the executor and the subgraphs efficiently. And there we looked at a couple of, I posted today an issue, so everybody can chime in and put in thought on that. So we explored all the various batching variants that are out there. Ideally, we find something that is very simple and also useful for other things that we can use. At the moment, the favorite, I think, from Martin and me is the variable batching that we found, which looks very promising. In the last meeting that we did, I did a slide and show all the variants of them. Yeah, for people who don't know what this is about, just join in on the spec repo, and there is a new issue that goes into detail on what the benefits of each of these batching algorithms are. When we get that solved, so why we are looking into that is to make sure that this approach that we at the moment exploring of a specification that doesn't require an entities field, for instance, then we get to a situation where we essentially can take every GraphQL server as a subgraph. Like, we still have directives and stuff like that, but a lot cleaner than we would use it today. But in order to validate that that is also working out, we need to solve this batching. Martin, anything to add?
No, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, one thing to maybe emphasize is that we would be looking at an addition to the current HTTP transport, something that we would expecting GraphQL servers to implement. But the hope is that it's a relatively light lift and that it's generally useful. So we're hoping for sort of widespread adoption. But it is sort of a barrier we have to consider.
Yes, and that's also what I pointed out in the document, right? Like, what is out there, like the most widely used is not the ideal solution. Like, there is batching, like also what Apollo is using in Apollo server, like this, where you basically post multiple requests. That is implemented by most GraphQL servers, but it's not ideal for what we want to use it for. it could be used for that, but it's a lot more hurdles, I think. So,
I think Derek.
but
So yeah, so I got a question because I do like the variable batching, right? But it's not part of the spec, meaning that adding it to the GraphQL spec is gonna take a while based on the previous history.
I mean, we wouldn't be adding it to the GraphQL spec though. We'd be adding it to the transport.
That's one of the
Okay, go ahead.
We had 4 or 5 or 6 different approaches discussed. I think, Michael, do you still have the presentation? Maybe you can add the presentation to. Is it on GitHub already?
No, I created an issue.
Oh, okay.
And
There's
the
an
issue
issue.
has a markdown document.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Because there the different cases there are listed, and what we ended up with was it's either fully spec compliant with transport and everything. It could be that it only breaks transport, or it could be that it's completely new syntax and it's progressively worse, right? Because if you have to change the graphical spec, that's bad. But if you only have to do a change in composition in the transport, it's probably easier to get that through because it's generally a useful concept. So that was the consideration there. Because all the approaches have pro and cons.
Yeah. So,
So
my only thing was basically if we're aiming to actually change the spec, that will take forever, and getting all the servers to support that will take even longer. So it's kind of like that would be my only concern. Other than that, it's if we're finding a way to go around it and still support it, that's perfectly fine.
So it's a very valid concern. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was one of the considerations we did, is the implementability, I would say. Where did I put it? 1 second.
It's in the composite schemas spec. So that's I've seen the issue there. Yeah.
One thing to consider in this case, I believe if I remember correctly, we said that there was still a possibility to do it without. It would just be n+1 request. So when you wouldn't have a compliant service and you would mark that as a non-compliant service, a public API, whatever, it would still work. It would just be not so efficient. And also, I believe the variable batching only really becomes an issue when you use require, right? Because otherwise you would have the entity resolvers which can already batch. For example, users by ID is a batch resolver kind of. You can fetch multiple users by ID.
That could work, but it would force people to basically expose every finder.
I mean,
it's a normal and a batching version. Yeah.
From a planning perspective, I would probably even prefer to have, I mean, if you have 2 options, either use variable batchings over a single entity resolver, or you have a specific resolver which acts as a batch resolver. That's basically like it should have a higher priority in planning. If you find something that does exactly what you want, you should probably use this in the planner rather than use variable batching on the single entity resolver. If you have something that is optimized for fetching a list, use it, right?
So I did a couple of experimentations with these batching over the last couple of weeks, and what I found out. So the good thing with variable batching, we could get that into the GraphQL over HTTP spec. I think the barrier for that is lower than getting it into the GraphQL spec itself, because there's a lot of things you would need to specify there. But so if it's in the transport specification, then the most simple implementation would be a loop around the normal execution. But if you put a bit more work, and that's what I explored, how feasible that is. If you put a bit more work in the execution and you kind of make this native to your executor, then you can reach the same performance, or you have the same overhead than a normal batch data loader puts on your system. I mean, for all these things, you have always a small overhead, but that it's achievable with that little overhead gave me confidence that this is actually a good approach where we could tell people, okay, this is a variation how you can make it really fast if you do this to your executor. But if you just want to support it, just do a loop around your executor. Kind of.
So I agree, it's fairly simple, straightforward thing to do. But again, this is adding it to a spec, not necessarily the graphical spec, even though it's an HTTP spec. That's not currently, well, it's widely adopted, but it's not adopted by all the servers, right? So like there is gonna be some barrier to entry for that, for folks to actually use that, right?
Sure. I think that is also the concern that Pascal voiced with there must be a fallback. And it also doesn't mean that like when we are finished with the specification, it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to have the underscore entities field, right? You can probably this is something that is also supportable, right? But like ideal is that in the future, where we make that more popular, to implement that, it leads to a cleaner subgraph or source schema,
maybe
whatever.
we can frame it just a little bit different, and then it doesn't sound so bad. What if what we talk about here is just an optimization? Then if you implement it, you get a performance benefit. If you don't implement it, it still works. But in case you use require and you don't have a batch resolver, then you have n+1 requests.
It's a bit of a foot gun though, because it could mean that like it will work, but n+1 performance is not generally acceptable. So it could mean that when you when someone adds a require, for instance, like suddenly like performance degrades. It might be better to have a mechanism in place to warn people about that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
So
in general, we also. Yeah, in general, I had a proposal with Benji also. And I just want to fill you in, Benji. And this is a more cleaner way you can do that, right?
Yeah, I like this one better than what we discussed, I think. So this is a really interesting problem, and I like the way that you all have thought about it. I would agree as well that getting things into the HTTP spec is much easier than getting them into the main spec. But also coming from the HTTP spec point of view, this seems to me like it would be an appendix anyway. It's effectively an extension, just like trusted documents would be. So we can implement it on top of the rest of GraphQL over HTTP as effectively a middleware. Thinking in terms of batch execution, certainly in the JavaScript ecosystem, what's quite common to do is to put data loaders on the GraphQL context itself. So effectively, as part of this batching, you would just generate one GraphQL context, which you would then use for all of these operations with the different variables. And that way, assuming you run them all in parallel, then you would get very similar performance. There's the slight overhead of having to loop multiple times over the AST to actually build the results. But broadly, the backend work would be similar. One significant concern that I would have with this is fine for queries, but what happens when mutations come in? Those would need to be serialized when they're executed, I think. And it's also not clear what this would mean for subscriptions. Would it return one stream with multiple, what's the word I'm looking for? Muxed results, multiplexed results?
Yeah. So I'm looking into mutations, but I would put what I'm looking into. It's a bit out of scope. I just explored it because it's just to explore future cases that we can do. Like for a mutation, you basically hit the mutation on one server, and then you have queries, right? You have the initial mutation that goes to the first server. That's one server you would invoke the mutation on, and then you have queries, and on the queries you can have again requirements.
I guess it's more about if you want to put this into the transport specification, as this syntax would also work with mutations and
I
subscription. You would
understand.
have to
but we could
specify
restrict it.
what
Yeah,
happens.
Okay.
I would say
I
restrict it to
was
queries
thinking,
for now.
I was thinking a different thing. That your question is different. Yeah. Okay. For queries, yeah, Claire, we would need to come up with.
Yeah,
for subscriptions, do we
it's
even
really
need
hard.
that for subscriptions? We
It's
don't
for
need that
subscription.
for
It's really hard. You could have it in subscriptions. One benefit would be that you only have one HTTP connection open if you use SSE, or you could subscribe to multiple entities via one SSE via one WebSocket request. But it's really hard because you don't know which of the events that come back are from which subscription, right? Like if you subscribe to this ID and this ID and this ID, and now you get back that something changed, how do you know which of the subscription that you just opened give you the event
yeah,
back?
that's out of
limited
scope.
to queries.
So the reason I bring this up
mutations.
isn't particularly for the composite schemas. It's like, if we're taking this thing and we're putting it into the HTTP spec, then what does it mean it being in the HTTP spec in general? Like if other people want to use that same syntax, but with mutations or subscriptions, what would that mean? And I think the conclusion of the group is we only need queries for composite schemas. The other forms, mutations shouldn't be batched anyway. They should just run one after the other. You run the mutation, you do all the queries then in parallel, and then once you've done that, you then move on to the next mutation field. So we don't need batching for that. And similarly for subscriptions, you just need to get that one event stream. So I think if we were to add this to the HTTP spec, we would explicitly state that this is only for query query operations, and that's it.
Yes.
So I would argue
like,
that mutations are also a very useful pattern, right? So let's say if you don't have a batch endpoint for updating like 10 IDs or whatever, right? If you could say, I want to insert user or update user 10 times, right? It's still useful that you run them sequentially. So kind of like the way that you have like the sequential versus parallel thing on the mutation versus query. So I think it still applies to it. I agree with the subscriptions, that gets very messy, but for mutation, I think still pretty reasonable.
Yeah, I agree. For batching,
and I think Michael actually has prior experience of doing this with the operation batching, where you used to send a whole series of operations through.
I also put that in the document. this one, you mean, right?
Yeah, no, yes, I am referring to that, but I'm referring to what you did like 2 years ago for doing this just in general, or 5 years ago, or however many years ago it was. But yeah, I think the variable batching is much better, much better, because it's the exact same document each time. And I think that is the critical thing here, the critical jump versus the prior art of allowing you to just put a list of things, which could then be like query mutation, query mutation, which would be
exactly
more challenging.
Yeah, that's also what we called out here. Like the operation batching has a nice application. It was made actually for defer. Is then used like I know that PayPal, for instance, is using it for mutation flows, but it's very niche application, and it's complex to implement, right? If you want to do it right for all cases. And for us, it's even not so usable. Like we don't, like if you look from what we want to solve, like flowing data within one GraphQL server from one request to another is not a capability we actually need, right? because like for us, it's that we have multiple GraphQL instances between which we want to flow data. And for this, like this form of batching is much more useful.
I mean, one of the first question people ask when they use the other form of query batching with the exports is, how do I specify transaction scope over all the operations that are in there? Now, in distributed GraphQL, this is a bit more difficult than just on one server, obviously. So.
Okay, but that's good. Like that the sentiment is relatively positive towards this. Yeah, Derek?
So I got a last final question. So there has to be some unique discriminator to determine that this is a variable batching versus the regular request, right? Because how do you determine whether you go one way or another?
I think right now it's just
literally
variables returns an array. Yeah.
Yeah, actually Benji had a remark to that. He pinged me when he saw that. He said variables should not be called variables. I think you had a better field for that, right?
I did. I forget what it was, like variable lists or something, whatever. But yeah, I think one of the key things in the GraphQL over HTTP spec is making the declaring which thing a GraphQL over HTTP request is. And a GraphQL over HTTP request, if it has a variables field, that must be an object. So if we're going to do a list of them, we should give that a different key, just a different value, different key there. And that's all it needs, I think.
And then you could even put it on the same endpoint and we just test if that key is in there.
Yeah,
like
there is some complexity there. So for example, if all of your variables are optional, then sending the request to the server with only the query and variables isn't present, but your variable list is, but the server ignores it, it might still execute it, just treating it as if the variables had been omitted. So there may be some negotiation that needs to happen there, maybe something in the content type or something.
But that would be fine, right?
Because
if you don't specify the array and you only have default values, the expected result should anyway be the same.
No,
because
what Benji means is you send it to a GraphQL server that is not doing batching. And this GraphQL server would just ignore that there is a key that it doesn't know and just execute a singular query.
Fair enough.
So
Understood.
contrary to what I said before, it may actually make sense to have it be the variables property. That way, a server that doesn't support it will throw an error saying, this is an array, we're expecting an object, sorry. Because that is the behavior that the current spec enforces. And then we can have an appendix that lets you implement a different behavior there.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we do a proposal on this? On the like an RFC document on the HTTP spec, Benji?
How confident are you that this solves all of the problems? Like, is this the solution now, or is it like this is one of the things we're thinking about, but we still need to experiment with it a bit more?
So my feeling, I don't know how Martin sees that, is I would like to have a couple more days with the directives, work through a couple more issues. I think I have most things working with that, but I would like to have a couple more days before I personally commit to it.
Yeah, might be good to have multiple implementations before we like implement it in GraphQL JS, for instance, or I mean Apollo server when we consider the transport.
Yeah, well, talking about a real life use case, coming from my past life at the previous company, They are relying on like a batching, right? Heavily. So batch comes to the gateway, and batch is being sent to each on one of those individual GraphQL subgraphs, right? And technically, those batches to the subgraphs, they don't have to be the same query. They just go to the same subgraph. So using this approach, you would still need to send potentially, I guess, 2 different requests for that.
You mean per
Yeah,
entity? Oh,
I think it doesn't replace normal request batching. It's an additional use
Yeah.
case.
Oh yeah. That's no, I'm conflating things.
Yeah, so you can, just to clarify that, you can do 2 levels of multiplexing. You can do top level request multiplexing, and then within each of the requests, you can then do variable multiplexing.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
yeah, because this is not going away, right? We have still this guy here, right?
Sounds good. Oh, so you do a request batching and variable batching. Oh, fancy.
But to be honest, like I haven't considered that even. But you could do that, yeah. Would be compatible.
Do you think that would be worth specifying at the same time? It might be easier to do them both at once than it will be to introduce just the inner one and then the other one later. I think they both come under the umbrella of batching.
Yes, we should do an RFC, because like even if we are not committing yet to it, it's easier for everyone who wants to try it out to implement it if you have an RFC, because then you can just say, okay, I'm trying that out, and we still have the flexibility to say, okay, it didn't work out, we're dropping this.
Yeah, if we do that, it might be good to point to like there's an old issue that was actually the inspiration for us trying this out again. Might be good to point to that.
Yeah, and there is one other thing that I want to, like, we should also have like this is easy to implement, but we should kind of have some guidance around that. What you should do that it's efficient, right? Like for instance, in JavaScript, it's good to have a data loader bound to the context and things like that, so that it's that people don't just make the loop, the simplest thing, but do a more refined loop, parallelize it good, and also ensure that we don't have data fetching on each of these threads in an inefficient way. So
okay, just wanted to bring us on track a little bit. This was meant to be a summary of the previous meetings before we then went to discuss them. So just to take us back to the schedule, we should now review our previous action items. And by the way, it sounds like you've all been very busy over these previous meetings. Well done. Great technical discussions. So I'm just opening up the action items now. We have the top one, which was from February. Everyone should review section 1, the overview. I've certainly seen a fair amount of activity on that. And I think there have been some various changes put in. Does anyone feel that section 1 doesn't correctly represent what we are trying to achieve in this working group? Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and close that action item. I think everyone has given feedback on that, so that is excellent. Also in action items, we have a few other things that I think may be from earlier efforts for the Composite Schemas working group. So these are from August 2022. So I think maybe they are no longer relevant. So let's have a look at each of those, and I'll get your feel on each of those. So I'm looking at issue number 68.
On the
So this was to
60.
add an example that was proposed during one of the previous meetings to a document on, I think, the subschema composability rules. Is that subschema composability rules document still relevant to the current work?
Likely
I
not.
don't think so. I mean, we will talk about composability, but I think this is just out of scope.
Okay,
Like
so it's
what they are talking about.
Sure. It's worth having a look over that old content to see if there's anything of use to the new stuff. But yeah, I think I'm going to agree, and I'm going to close that as no longer in scope. Then we'll move on to number 69. Investigate, test, or rules suite for composability rules. Again, this relates to the old composability rules, which was a document we were working on, and we wanted to build a test suite for it. Ideally, we should have a test suite for new composability rules, but I think it's a bit premature to call for that.
Yeah.
So I suggest we close this one as well. Yeah, general nods of agreement. So I shall go ahead and close that. And we have a action to split the glossary into 3 files and add it to the RFCs folder. So there's a glossary file, or there was at least a glossary file. There was also a document, or some of the terms in the glossary were things about the various vendor solutions. So talking about, I don't know, federation, subschemas, this kind of thing, defining what those terms were, and also potentially some terms that we should avoid when talking about this. I think that has probably been addressed by the new work that we're doing. So I think this is also probably out of scope. Does anyone agree, disagree? Yeah, I see some nods of agreement. Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and close all of that. So congratulations, everyone. There are no open action items until we file the ones from today. Perfect. Okay. Oh, I've closed the wrong tab, and now I've lost our agenda. 3G agendas.
Next time on the agenda is review progress, I think.
Yeah, I think that's probably correct. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess I'll kick us back into the previous discussion then. Do we want to talk? In fact, before we go back to that, let's talk about the blog post, because generally what we do, certainly in the main working group, is we move the shorter items to the top so that they get done out of the way, and then we move back to the main thing. So Jeff, can I hand over to you for that?
Yeah, I just added it, but I know I'm not the only one who's been thinking along these lines. I think in parallel, there have been several different conversations being had. I heard around this. Michael and I were just chatting about it, and gee, we get in touch both directly and through other means. So I think the idea here is just I think this group is significant and worth letting the community know, at least at a high level, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what it means for GraphQL and for the community. And would love to just get the group's thoughts on what sorts of themes we want to hit there. I'll just read from a DM thread that I had with Michael just a few minutes ago, if that's all right, Michael.
Sure.
Yeah, and my Slack list is way too long. Okay, here we go. So I think Michael said, talking about inviting the community to join and GraphQL's transformation to an orchestrator in a microservice architecture. I think it's a relevant point. I put in composition / distributed execution of GraphQL servers solves a real pain point for users. GraphQL has become a language that unifies the entire stack. The idea there being like there's if you haven't paid attention for a while, right, like some folks might be under the impression that GraphQL is sort of a BFF type of technology, and this I think this group is meeting, I think, is a change in kind of the industry consensus around that. Pointing out that this pattern is increasingly widespread in popular tools. We certainly see a lot of tooling around that kind of solve this problem being around there. Composite Schemas Working Group has broad support from many GraphQL vendors in both large and small. And we're working towards a draft specification. I don't think we need to be super specific on like what that means necessarily, because if folks want to dive into the details, they can always join a meeting and things like that. And I think that gets back to Michael's point of like, hey, join, you know, help out.
Yeah, I think
I don't know.
it's
How does that sound?
we're doing that not often enough, having like blogs about what we do in the foundation, so that people kind of get know where we are pushing. Like defer and stream is one other thing. But yeah.
I think one thing to perhaps consider here is, as part of the blog post, I think we should at least here agree on the terminology. So I think we had some discussions on issues. Distributed execution, I think, was the term like most recently proposed. Makes a lot of sense to me, but I think that's something that maybe we should sort of explicitly agree on. I think we definitely want to mention federation and the relationship to federation, because that's terminology that's well known to people and that's been in use for a while. I'm not sure how other people think about the relationship between distributed execution and federation. Is that something we need to differentiate between? Is distributed execution sort of an abstract term that we decide to use in the spec, but in practice, what people will see when they look at it is a specification for federated execution? What do people think here?
Yeah, there are, how you call that? There are different. There are definitely technical terms in the specification when we call about when we talk about an executor and stuff like that. And there, for me, it's important that we are in a language that is derived from the core spec. I'm not so much concerned about calling something federated architecture or so in the overall sense when we talk about the whole approach. But like when we talk in the spec text, then we talk about execution, then we should be precise in the spec language.
That makes a lot of sense to me. For the spec, I think with the blog post, we're sort of crossing over to user territory. So perhaps a term like federated architecture could be helpful there.
Sure.
One thing to consider too is just like when
I've
people are searching too, like what are they going to find? We want them to be able to find it. So if they're searching for federation, if they're searching for fusion, I think that they should at least get a hit here, or whatever else. What other technologies are we want to highlight or at least mention? It doesn't have to be a focus.
We should, from an SEO perspective, I 100% agree. But the other question as well is, what do you aim for, right? Because if we want to promote this way of thinking, not only as a progression in GraphQL, but a progression in distributed systems, then federation is a terminology that a non-GraphQL federator doesn't really know or expects to be there, right? So generally talking about gateways, distributed, executor, whatever, is a lot more approachable for people which might not even know what GraphQL is, you know, and therefore we should definitely mention fusion, we should definitely mention federation, whatever, for SEO purposes and to get people from these topics also interested. But in general, it's about distribution and execution, and GraphQL is what we do, right?
So I was just thinking, well, maybe we need not a single blog post, but a series of blog posts. Because I think there's like different personas that will be actually interested in different things, right? So
Yes.
from customers that are using this technology already, right? I think they would like to hear, yes, we hear you, we're trying to standardize it, and this is, this is where the industry is heading, that we're trying to standardize it, and we got you, right? You got the right choice, right? Folks that are new to this journey, they might want to learn about like how this is progressing, this is being also standardized, but it's a slightly different audience, I think, in those two, because the first one, it kind of like wants to hear, yeah, I chose this technology, that's a good choice, right? It's going to be supported. The other one is like, oh yeah, that's happening, so there's going to be some options to choose you from. So I think those, maybe, I don't know if one post can actually do both.
It doesn't have to be one post. I think the initial post that we should do is we are working on this topic, and we are working on this topic as a group. Like Apollo is included there, the guild is included there, Chili Cream, like all the GraphQL community is coming together on this and is working together to solve this problem in a standard way. I think that is the first blog post we should have, because it's kind of inviting people and telling people also, like, we are not creating like 5 different standards here and everybody has to choose. But we are working on this together, and I think and then we can have like follow-up blog posts on whatever. Like it's anyway, as I said before, we should have anyway more of these blogs to tell people what we are doing.
Speaking on behalf of the GraphQL Content Committee, 100% agree. We need more content out there. So yes, please, more blog posts. This is good. And yes, absolutely different posts for different audiences. And I think it is entirely reasonable to talk about who and why we are doing this thing. And then later, maybe more of the technical stuff, maybe more of the terminology and things as well. Also agree everything that was said about SEO, hitting all of the right keywords that people will be looking for, and also the familiarity for people that know about distributed execution in other systems, for example. I think we can just put a lot of these words in, and a lot of them pair together nicely. So just to round out the discussion, how do we take this, yes, we'd like to write a blog post, and turn it into, we have written a blog post?
Maybe we start with like
just take the
a Google Doc or
recordings.
something.
We just take the recordings from the last sessions, put them into ChatGPT, and we have a blog post.
So I started with Jeff on this asynchronously, and I want to invite Martin to it. So we have also like from different perspectives. I also pinged Yuri about that, because like he is also quite involved in this topic, and then we just do it asynchronously. I think we should move on that. It should be quickly and an uncomplicated process.
That sounds great. Also, one of the things I was talking with Jory earlier, one of the things that is quite nice on the blog is when we have like byline that has more than one person in it. So pulling in more organizations, especially from a post that is saying everyone in the ecosystem is working together to build this solution, having like, Chili Cream, Apollo, the Guild, and whoever else wants to be, excuse me, anyone else who wants to be a contributor to that post would be excellent. So yeah, please continue. Also, if you'd like any editorial help or anything like that, please feel free to add myself and Jory to the document. Do that whenever is convenient, and we can help with that. Yeah, please do lean on me for any support that you need there.
Yeah, by the way, just a side note, Derek, should we also put you in, like, we have a Slack group at the moment?
I asked Uri to add him, but I think you should also be able to add him. For some reason, we're not able to add people.
Yeah, I'm also not, because like Yuri started this group, so it's a guild group. So only people like Camel can do it, I think. Camel?
Well,
you should be able to add in.
I can try.
There's something weird though, because in the list of organizations, it says Chili Cream is able to post an invite,
Yes.
but we are not.
Okay.
And it might actually be a
Let
setting
me-
on our
You
side.
got the powers then, Michael.
Yeah.
I try it. I will
Of course,
try it.
any of the TSC can add people on the Discord. Just saying.
Yeah.
I'm
That's
good with
that's
Discord
the
too. Like, yeah.
that is another thing we could. So I discussed that with Benji before, like a way either because like we live on Slack, like Chili Cream lives on Slack, and Discord is like this little thing that we always have to start. It's not like as convenient, but a way that we either copy the messages automatically into Discord, or the other way around would be a way to include someone else. But like for me, it also has to be convenient to message around, because like before I was doing this kind of messaging together with Carmel and Martin on an email basis, which was not ideal.
I mean,
And I think the
one-
main benefit of Slack is that it's much easier to keep track of things and not miss messages. It's not.
And threading
I
is
mean-
actually a thing, but on Discord, that's oof.
Yeah.
I'm
All
on.
right. Sorry, I pushed us a little bit off topic there. But yeah, anything we can do to improve transparency and make these things searchable later is important. So if there is any way of exporting anything from there, that would be great. And also making it easier for other people to get involved. We've got about 9 minutes of the meeting left. Did we want to go back to the previous discussion?
Yeah, I think so. On batching, like let's go ahead, make an RFC of batching, like for the HTTP spec. I mean the standard batching, request batching, we want to anyway have there. And so let's make an RFC that we do as a companion to the HTTP spec. See you, Jeff.
See you later, everybody.
then-
Thank you.
And then people can implement it and try it out. Apart from that, we need to work through, and I think like I will post a couple of things there into our group. We need to work through the directives to kind of polish them. They are not polished because we just copied them from Fusion from Apollo Federation together. Now we have to start polishing them and really see if that's going to work out with the batching form we have. So everybody, like that would be the next steps for us as a group. And once we have kind of when we are like, let's say 80% sure that this works out, we can start on composition, like start writing the composition. But before we are not sure that this set of directives works out, it's difficult to write a composition for that.
Okay, so to summarize, write a basic RFC into the GraphQL over HTTP spec. Then we can each do implementations of that we can test to make sure that what we're building is actually likely to work.
Yes.
Sounds ideal. Are you planning, Michael, to take on the writing of that RFC, or is that something someone else should do?
So I can definitely post it, but anyway, everybody can also take on things they want to do. Like I should be not a blocker.
Is anyone particularly keen to write this GraphQL over HTTP spec pull request?
Okay, I'm gonna do it.
Sounds like that might be on you, Michael.
I mean, I'm happy to be involved, but I'm not necessarily keen on taking it on. But I'm happy to be part of it.
No. I just didn't want to. I always say I'm writing it, and I'm due, but I don't want to kind of say I have to write it. So if anybody here wants to do it, So go ahead.
I'm
But I
also,
can do it.
again, happy to help with any editorial that you need on that, Michael, as well. So yeah, by
Yeah,
all means, run it by me
Anyway,
once you've got the
come
first
always
draft.
to you, you know.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Okay. Is there any last things we want to comment on? Anything else that we covered at the previous working groups that we may not have summarized here yet? No, wonderful. Well, thank you ever so much, everyone, for all of your hard work on this. It sounds like we are making absolutely excellent progress. Even though there was 2 fewer meetings this month, I think it was still excellent progress to be shown. Great technical discussions as always. Sounds like one of the next things after batching to discuss and to make sure that we understand is the finalization of the terminology. So that will be some interesting bike shedding to be done, I'm sure. Yeah, keep up the great work, and I'll see you next month.
So just a heads up.
Right. Thank you.
So just a heads up, I for probably for another month or two, I won't be able to join the secondary ones. I'll try to get I'll be on the primary ones, and I'll keep an eye on the issues on the repos, but I'll probably won't be joining the secondary ones.
Yeah, I add you to the group. Then we can also asynchronously just if you have something.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay.
All right.
See you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you, folks. Bye.